And continuing on to the next section, highlighting classical traditional theism in light of Daniel Shepard's symbiotic panentheism. What new concept has classical traditional theism that is the next size up of the causative force, or God, firmly established within society? God, or the causative force, is so big, he, she, it includes everything but the universe. In this sense, classical theism presents a God that is somewhat abstract in some far-off heaven, wholly separate from his, her, its creatures or creation. Almost omnipresent, almost all-present. And in this we find a contradiction as well. The substance dualism present within classical traditional theism is so pervasive. They claim full omnipresence, but they don't necessarily. It's unrealized conceptually. And this is one of the major differences between symbiotic panentheism and classical theism. One being that of a more systematic, doctrinal-based theology and religious-oriented, while the other is more of a philosophical theology, akin more to open and process theism, and perhaps more of a mystical perspective as well. So the differences are there, some among many. What does the conceptual framework of classical traditional theism have to offer us? Classical traditional theism, Charles Hartshorne has pointed out that in classical theism, that is the medieval conception of God as absolute, the feature of divine transcendence is overwhelming in its dominance. In this view, indeed, there is only a one-way relation between God and world, between sinful man, based on the concept of original sin doctrine. That is, the world is related to God, but God is not related to the world. Not so in panentheism in process theologies. Dictionary of Philosophy and Religion, William L. Rees, page 765. Classical traditional theisms include the Western religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam mentioned in this text. And I'll mention that these three religions are not unified. They are contending to this day for religious supremacy. These three, in addition to many others, speak of the transcendence of God, or the causative force. In introducing the transcendence of the causative force, they isolate our universe from the causative force. They claim the universe is not part of the causative force because it is imperfect, quote unquote. And to them, it is illogical for an imperfect universe to be inside a perfect being. Although transcendence is an excellent way to explain how the causative force avoids our imperfection. It also contradicts the most significant characteristics these religions assign to the causative force, and that is the characteristic of omnipresence, or the idea that the causative force is everywhere. It is either everywhere or it is not. And classical theism contradicts this notion. While claiming omnipresence, it is unrealized. By claiming separation, classical traditional religions do, however, expand the conceptual size of the causative force over the size assigned to the causative force by atheism. So it is a step up, but it does have its paradoxes and contradictions. Under classical traditional theisms, the causative force now has size, denying the concept of the universe lying within the causative force, or you could say God's belly, is not quote-unquote bad, but this denial contradicts the basic perceptions these religions wish to assign the causative force. The process of assigning omnipresence to the causative force while at the same time excluding the universe, excluding perhaps other spiritual traditions. It is a theology of exclusion as a part of the causative force. Solves the irrationality of evil being within and therefore a part of the causative force. But at the same time, this exclusion introduces an even greater problem, and that is the lack of sense of belonging and significance. This lack of a sense of belonging and significance presents tremendous paradoxes for humankind. Classical theism has unwittingly produced its opposite within a substance dualistic mindset, and that being the atheistic God, or the concept of there being no God whatsoever. And so there you have the opposites, the dualism that is pervasive within classical traditional theism. And that is one sharp distinction between theism and panentheism, which doesn't do this, because it doesn't operate through a substance dualism. I'd argue rather that it is in fact non-dualism and process and events rather than separate substances.